the basketball.
Yeah, so I heard that.
That's right.
Like it's spring break, so let's get it back in the circle so that kids can get out there and play.
Well, my recommendation would be, we just do away with the ordinance on here. So, I don't know what y'all say.
And any of the yays were good,
Yeah.
get it back to where it is.
Well, let me see where it is on it. We'll make sure we move it up.
It's at 750.
Oh, it's number 3.
I believe so, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much. Hey, how are you?
Hey, Sean.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how about yourself? Did we see any meeting dates? Oh, it's nice and cool over here.
I just minimize this.
All right, very good.
So, and then,
Nothing stuck out.
They have, okay, so you got that going.
the ones that are on the Sean David,
And I didn't hear from Chief Alex.
Billy's
Yeah, Bruce Randall.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's all.
Yeah, I'm.
Okay.
Don't worry about exposure.
Okay, all right. Okay. Yeah, all right, yeah, I didn't know that was supposed to, that's good. They at least have that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. Okay.
This chair is low.
Which is fairly like driving some of the so.
They had one PUI.
2 years, just the hospital, they're closed, for all the transportation.
For all.
Well, yeah, so it could be, all right, in 2 years.
Where Indian Trail's got a whole
That
list.
was going on for the 5 year. Maybe just around about, don't know, until we're all. If they want just to say, all right, we're going to. 40%. Another part for the $600 the other part for the development. Do that, and around dollars, pots of money. I don't think that was.
Oh, $1 now?
Well, to have it, because to have it, rather than get a seal, it's just one thing, that's for the next piece, to put that any of the other things that we listen here.
Another TIA, so that one's in there.
Y'all ready?
Yes, sir.
All righty. Well, welcome to everybody to our council meetings. I appreciate y'all coming out tonight. So if y'all please stand for the invocation, and then we'll do the pledge. Dear Lord, just thank you for the many blessings you've given us. Thank you for a celebration of your son's resurrection this past weekend. We give you all the victory and glory for everything you do for us. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All righty, so we have one signed up for public comments. Miss Teresa Moya Mendez. Yes, ma'am. So just state your Yeah, pass that stuff out first, that'd be great. And then just state your name and address for the record.
Alright. My name is Teresa Moya Mendez. I live at 104 Houston Blair Road, formerly 5035 Stevens Mill Road. We moved, just the address change. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for listening to me this evening. In 2015, Ryland Homes acquired the property adjacent to ours to construct a housing development. In that acquisition, they required an easement agreement with us since their new road would be cutting across our existing driveway. Our property is in yellow on that front page and our old driveway is pink. So their main road had to cut across there. We were hesitant to sign this agreement because we were concerned about the additional stormwater runoff this development would create. Ms. Paxton, who was the realtor representing the seller, had Hamilton Stolpen, a representative of Ryland Homes, call and talk to my husband and myself. He assured us that the stormwater would not be a problem. We asked him if he would be willing to put that in writing, and he sent me an email with the letter that is attached there. By the way, not one of those promises that he made in that letter has been kept. Even after the conversation, we were not completely convinced, so I called the town. We wanted to make sure about the water. Ms. Hare set up a meeting with herself, Mr. Easterly, Mr. Stolpen, and Brian Johnson, who was the Vice President of Land Development for Ryland, with their engineer, and I'm sorry I cannot remember his name, and my husband and myself. We were again assured by all that there would be no impact from additional stormwater. We were even told in this meeting that this development may improve the way stormwater drains from our property. After these assurances, we felt much more comfortable agreeing to the easement. Unfortunately, this development did not improve any water issues, but has significantly worsened them. The picture that you have there is of my driveway on Saturday, April 13th, after a storm dropped just over an inch of rain. Attached is the data from the U.S. Geological Survey rain gauge located at Highway 74 and 485. If this is what we get from just over an inch, I can't imagine what it's going to be like with a more powerful summer storm. Ryland Homes, who became Cal Atlantic, who became Lennar, has not diverted any stormwater runoff away from us, but almost all of the stormwater from this development drains directly down onto our property. As more houses and their driveways are completed and more impervious surface is created, the flooding is becoming worse and worse. It is washing gravel, sediment, even construction rocks onto our property, making it impossible to maintain because it destroys our equipment to try to mow the grass. I also have a video of the flooding from April 13th. If any of you would be willing to look at it, I will be more than happy to email it to you. My husband and I came to the town hall on Tuesday, April the 16th and showed the video to Mr. Easterly. I emailed it to him. He has not contacted me back other than when I emailed him again to ask him if he received it. He said he did. Again, I am here to ask for the town's help. Is there anything that the town can do to compel now Lennar to keep just the one original promise of diverting the stormwater? We would sincerely appreciate any assistance, and I'd just like for you to imagine how you would feel if this were your home.
Yeah. Well, I've seen the video, so if Chris could send it to you, Alex, and then you send it out to everybody, sure, because it's worth seeing, because it is a large amount of
Well,
water.
that paints a big picture,
Well,
the picture alone.
yeah, the video is more water than that.
Yeah,
so,
but that's-
yeah, Dave,
that's
you
too
got-
much.
You got a question?
Pardon, my eyes are not that good. I cannot see this map so well.
Okay.
Where are we on here? I kind of got an
All
idea
right.
we're
Let's
there,
do
but
this.
what's your property number?
My property is highlighted in yellow.
And the address is?
It's now 104 Houston Blair Road. We had to change our address since that road cut through, and we were no longer technically accessible from Stevens Mill.
But previously it was Stevens Mill.
It was Stevens Mill. It was our
Because
old
you live
address.
right near Wheeling, right?
Willie, Plowman, the little boy who just passed away, yes ma'am.
Okay.
That, if you look up from my property, that is their property, the big, large chunk there.
Are you the point approaching? Look it up, man.
I'm trying to see where we are. Stevens
That's
now?
Stevens now.
Yes, this is me, right here. All this used to be woods.
Seen that place.
All this used to, this is, you can see these little lines here? That's the sediment pond that is breaching terribly. That's causing all this to come down on top of us.
Well, the first step, you know, you give it to Chris, that's the great, the first thing, and then, Alex, if you can get with Chris and review the conditions that, Lennar now, certainly must pass along the information, whoever was the original developer. So just make sure they're aware of all the, and then, we'll get back to you, Teresa, and, get you an answer.
Thank you.
But yeah, we have conditions that they had to meet, and if they're not meeting, it, we'll address it. So,
Ms. Mendez, you want to write, I know you already communicated with Chris, but you want to write down your email for me?
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask her a question as well? Teresa, do you guys currently have to go into your property from Houston Blair Road?
Yes, ma'am.
You can no longer access the other road?
It is there and it's accessible,
Okay,
but the way the easement agreement read was that we were supposed to now use Houston Blair and turn. If we try to order anything, you know, Amazon or whatever, or pizza, they can't find our property from Stevens Mill anymore. I have to tell them to come, you know, down into the neighborhood, because it's very confusing.
well, we'll get you some answers. Now, in your opinion, I showed you those, we all got the photographs from Hickory, and her property backs up to the Hickory neighborhood. Do you think that overflow of the sediment pond is causing some of their issues, or? is
I
it
don't
only-
think so, because the creek, that, my driveway has flooded twice, well, 3 times now, in the past 26 years. One was in 2014 when we had the 100-year flood, and 2015 when they had the 500-year flood, and they had to close the bridge.
Because the water was on it.
Yes.
Because I was down there.
The creek did not reach its bank this
This time?
past
Oh,
Saturday.
okay, good.
So the creek wasn't the issue. That's not the problem
It's
at
just the
this
runoff.
point. It's just the runoff from that subdivision.
All
And
right.
is this one of the roads that they were supposed to pave in their agreement?
They were supposed to, exactly, yes.
All right. So we'll get you some answers quickly here, Teresa. Thank y'all for coming in.
Thank you
for
so
bringing it
much.
to us.
All righty.
And just a little background on this, if I recall, and Debbie correct me, when this developer approached the town to develop this land, they were not happy with our questions and comments. And so, they just wanted to, and I basically told them, you're gonna cause problems due to the setbacks and whatnot, because they wanted a higher density. And I wonder if this is retaliation, because they brought in lawyers. And you can talk to Aaron about that, and Melanie, they wanted to sue us if they returned the denial. That's how ugly it had gotten after the fact.
Thank you for that background.
Just, and you could, and Lynn could probably provide more information to Aaron when she gets back to school. Because, we asked them to change it, and they were just not willing to budge. So we had no other choice to deny it. I mean, in my opinion, from my perspective.
All right. Next up is, thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is the agenda approval, so any changes or additions or amendments?
I'd like to pull the Whetstone Drive abandonment discussion from tonight's meeting, and
Okay. Any other changes? All right. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda with the deletion of number 6, Whetstone Drive abandonment?
I'll make that
so
motion.
moved.
All right. Motion by Ms. Steele, second by Mr.
Sure.
Sure.
Yep. All in favor, please raise your hand. That's unanimous. All righty. Well, first up, we have a new board member, council member, for y'all that are new here, Mr. Billy Bert, yeah, it's not Red, it's Bert, right? Is gonna join us. We had a, last Monday night, we had our first budget session for this upcoming budget year, and Billy was involved in that, but this is his first council member for the council meeting, so he's on board. So I just want to introduce him and say welcome.
Thank you.
All right. All right, first up is the Atrium Hospital site, the closed access break support request, and Mr. Blakely's here. He'll walk us through it.
Mayor, we may have some folks here for public comment.
Oh, it just came in?
Yeah, anybody sign up?
You're just one for Idlewild already?
Yes.
Okay, so no. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Good evening. I'm Steve Blakely with Kimley Horn, and we have been working on the project. I think some of you have seen it, maybe some of you in a little more detail than others. And it's on the corner of Stallings Road and US 74, essentially between 74 and Matthews Indian Trail Road. And it's a proposed mixed use with healthcare facilities and other standard mixed use elements. And with the healthcare component of this, there is an emergency department associated with it. And we prepared the traffic impact analysis under your ordinance, under contract to the town. It has been completed and submitted to NCDOT at this point. Lee, the district engineer, has sent it to congestion management, so it's under that review process right now. Within that traffic impact study, we evaluated two scenarios. One that has, actually we did two scenarios. One at the roundabout, essentially the spine entrance coming in off of Stallings Road, has two different functional types. One is a leftover, the other is a roundabout. The leftover we proposed as a signalized leftover. Ambulances, fire trucks, etc., could use preemptive technology to trigger that signal to go green if they were approaching and needed to get into the campus. And then the roundabout, of course, it would just be a typical roundabout scenario. The second evaluation that we looked at is this driveway connection up here, and the one in green, and that's the one we're here to talk about a little bit tonight. It is a proposed drive that would connect to essentially the road that leads into the business section of US 74. Not to the toll, it doesn't connect to the toll facility, it's past that point, but it would connect eventually into the US 74 by continuing east. I'm just going to use 74 as east-west for reference. The difficulty is twofold. Based on the timing of some of the CON agreements, according to the hospital, they need to have an opening within 2 years. And based on the timing of the review of the traffic study, it's going to take probably 60 days. So to meet that 2-year deal, they need to accelerate their planning and have a little better idea on where the emergency department should be located. Okay, so we're having to accelerate the notion of the second point here, and that is this driveway is falling within the controlled access section of 74. So in a little more detail, when the state bought this property from Dennis, they took this section through here and purchased that section under controlled access terms, which means they paid him for the property as well as paid him for loss of access to that particular road. Okay, so that is a procedure to sort of unbreak that of going back through NCDOT, which is a Controlled Access Committee, and formally request the ability to revoke that hierarchy of road and allow a driveway to be connected to it. That takes much longer than the traffic impact study does. So therefore, we're trying to get a little better handle on whether or not NCDOT could support this break and connection to the ramp ahead of that, so Atrium could move forward with an appropriate site plan and place the emergency department where it needs to be on site to allow for the quickest ingress to serve in emergency situations. A critical part of getting that early recognition of whether they would support it or not is clearly support from the local municipality. So with that in mind, I wanted to come here and show you this and see if y'all would be willing to support the break and controlled access request to NCDOT, which if you do, then we would submit a package of information through Lee and Scott Cole that they would review, and then from there take to various representatives in Raleigh and request some early readings, so to speak, of their agreement or appetite on approving this controlled access break. So what we've done on this particular graphic is given them some dimensions for consideration. There is one speed limit sign posted on this, at least that I can see right now during the construction, and it's posted at 35 miles per hour.
Which I think is funny, because you're coming off 485, and you have to slow down from that to 35.
Yeah,
But you have 2 stoplights to do
You just have to know, and if it's green, you're not going to.
Words of experience.
that. Gotcha.
Just, I've seen people do it.
I haven't done that.
so that 35 is posted here, and what we've indicated, just to give you a little more background on the graphic, there are driveways located in this section, and that's really where the 35 mile per hour sign is posted. You get up to Stallings Road, and that's where, clearly the signal's there. The driveway closest to the signal is a little over 500 feet away as it exists today. And moving to the east of Stallings Road, we chose a point sort of midway between Stallings Road and the Gore area of where essentially US 74 business ties into this particular connection that we're requesting break and control access of. And we wanted to get it far enough away from the signal that it didn't interfere with the Stallings Road signal, but keep it back far enough from the Gore area that it didn't interfere with the drivers as they're merging into US 74. So this is a proposed location at this point for discussion purposes. It's a little over 800 feet east of Stallings Road and about 500 feet plus or minus west of the Gore along that section. So that gives you a little indication of that. And drilling into the details, at least on the plans, NCDOT has this section coming through coming eastbound on this section of road, through Stallings Road as 2 lanes. And what that does is it merges into a single lane, of course, before it actually merges onto US 74 business. So if they're willing to consider this break request, that we need to work through that, but that's part of that conditional approval. If they say we're willing to support it conditionally upon various requirements, and clearly working out the traffic control, the positioning of it, the drain, all the drainage, and an enhancement fee, and we can talk about that if you want to, but that's another part of that whole process that will need to be worked out. It's a detail as part of those conditions. But for graphic purposes, what we did on this one is the shoulder lane, we just showed dropping into this driveway, and that still leaves these drivers a little over 800 feet to merge into the lane if they're simply wanting to bypass this drive and get right on US 74 business. All right. Let me pull up one other graphic that we created just for representation purposes to simplify it a little bit. The blue lanes are essentially the toll road facility, okay? The salmon colored lengths of roadway are more or less the 3 lanes, US 74 business lanes. And then the green is what we've labeled, and we took some liberty labeling this, but we called it service road. And it's mainly because it is servicing the local land uses, the local roads, and through here, businesses, individual businesses.
And that's how some of the documents for labor was built.
Yeah, yeah, okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
You need copies, I can get you some.
All right, that's good. So, you know, it's generally consistent. You know, so the request fits into that. I mean, the speeds are lower. The one, other than it being controlled access and it was purchased that way, the one difference between this link from Stallings Road to get onto the 74 piece, it's somewhat acting like a ramp. Okay, so it's not a true ramp like if you're getting onto an interstate from a local service street, but it is a connector. It's really more of a connector than it is a ramp, but it has those characteristics. So that could have some effect on the consideration from NCDOT, but you know, there's a lot of spacing in there. The majority of the 74 bypass traffic is not going to be down here on what we've termed the service road. It's going to be the local traffic that's wanting to get into the community or to these local businesses. And by having, so one of the benefits of having this driveway here for the emergency room is if you think about coming from either direction on 74, whether it's the toll or whether it's the business lanes, they're going to come through the Stallings Road interchange. If without that drive, they would go through both signals if they're coming from the east. So come through the signals, come up here and go through either the roundabout or the leftover, come into campus, loop around on, you know, parking lot type roads, internal loop road type service, and loop themselves around to get to here. So that time to do that at the lower speeds, get through this intersection, and get through these two signals, you know, adds up. And in an emergency situation, you compare that routing and the amount of time for the service, for the emergency folks to just go straight on that facility and hang a right and get straight to an emergency department can make a big difference in time. So that's really the benefit of it avoiding, not just today, but in the future, you know, the traffic that would build on Stallings Road. And then whatever interference might be on site at that particular time, I mean, you know, for facilities. So that's the general overview of the request, is seeking, you know, input and support if you feel such.
All right.
That could go up to NCDOT.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions for Mr. Clayton?
On that, where you have the one right in, right out, do you think the DOT could possibly require you to put some auxiliary lanes to help alleviate some of the confusion?
Yep.
I don't think it'll be a traffic issue, I just think it'll be confusing
Yeah.
for possible drivers, because they're already confused as it is with that design.
Right. Yeah, so that, and that could be an option. Actually, probably the primary option that NCDOT might want, and that is instead of using the inside lane as a drop lane to come into the hospital, leave the functionality of the two lanes so they can build up, accelerate, get the speed going, merge in, and then get on 74. But then have a separate right turn lane, let's say,
Right.
that allows folks that do want to get into it to actually move into that lane and allow these two original lanes that they built to function as designed. So if I was guessing, it would probably be that more than it would be to drop this lane.
I would agree.
And, you know, the good thing is we've got about 800 feet
To work with.
that we could start a taper, do a quick taper, and have a full lane, so those people are out of the way and not interfering at all with folks just want to get on 74.
Yeah, I agree.
And we could actually change this graphic to represent that if you feel better. Use that one as the one that gets sent to NCDOT.
Billy?
Maybe I missed it, but where was the emergency department gonna be? Is it gonna be close to that entrance?
Yeah,
That's what they're trying to decide.
that's right. That's what they're trying to decide. And because of the 2-year window, they're needing to start drawings like within 30 days. And so I think their preference would be to have it over here. But there's so much riding on the if of whether or not this is approved, that if it's not approved, or if NCDOT can't approve, you know, can't support it, then it's, I think they're feeling it's gonna have to get located somewhere else that has the second best level of accessibility to minimize that time to get patients or injured, on the hospital and in the hands of the doctors.
All righty. Well, to make the motion here to support it, Steve, what would we say? We have the letter from, what was it, gentleman's name?
Bennett Thompson?
Yeah, Mr. Thompson, but would we call it, we support the closed access break?
Yeah, so support breaking the controlled access facility from that location.
All right.
We could draft a document for you if you'd want that.
Well, we want to get it done tonight.
Okay. Yeah, so it would be supporting a request to NCDOT to break the controlled access for this section, as we're calling it, the frontage road or the service road,
All right,
between Stallings Road and its connection to US 74.
all right, so.
I got it, I
All
think,
right,
I think
we'll make
just
the
based on what y'all were
We'll
saying.
make the motion and then we'll let
Okay.
Steve.
I'd like to make a motion that we support breaking the closed access point for the Atrium Hospital site.
But maybe controlled access point instead of closed access point.
Controlled,
Yeah.
okay? So we support breaking the controlled access point for the Atrium Hospital site. That work?
All right. Alex, did you have something?
Okay, quick question. Steve, how would they prevent, if access is broken there, how would they prevent non-emergency traffic from getting in there? What are the options?
Probably wouldn't do that, so that could be another thing NCDOT would have a concern with is if somebody wanted to get into this, depending on the other land uses and how it's laid out, if, the way this actual drawing is laid out, somebody could come down, take a right into here, loop through the development, loop through here, and get up to Matthews Indian Trail Road. So that is a potential. I mean, if, putting up some kind of gate that, the preemptive measures could control and activate like a signal, I don't think I've ever seen it in a hospital facility. But that would be about the only way to prevent it.
I don't
Is some
think
form.
hospital did that either. I think I've seen people come off of Old 51 and get to New 51 through Novant. They come off of that Old
Yes.
51, those businesses, and drive around to get over to their side. So, I've never, in all the times we've lived here and been over there, I've never seen it become a problem, but.
All right, we got a motion and now we have a second by Mr. Scholl. So, all in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. That's unanimous, all right? And then Alex, can we write something up? Saying, something, not a resolution that we're talking about, just letters.
Letter from the mayor.
That you can send to Steve or whoever you need to send it to.
Okay.
And then if I need to sign it or whatever, I'm in town all week, so I get it done quickly.
Absolutely, we'll draft something up, send it to you, make sure you're okay with it, and then get you signed and send it
All
on to
right.
Steve.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank
That's
you
good.
for coming in,
Thank you.
Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next,
you.
next step, what we'll do is take this letter, we've crafted a little technical memo that describes generally the components that I talked about tonight with these graphics, and that package of information will be sent, like I said, to Lee and Scott, and then they would sort of host the channeling of it through other folks within DOT to get yay or nay on that. So,
All right.
so, and Atrium would actually be the applicant. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Steve. All right, next up is number 3, the town ordinance 94.01, the basketball goals. So Alex sent us out a detail. Oh, Aaron did it, and then via Alex. So Alex, you want to summarize for us?
Sure. During our last regular meeting, some citizens, Mr. Steve Turner, Mr. Kristen Turner, came to report that they had a violation of this ordinance and expressed some concerns, and there was discussion about whether this ordinance was in the best interest of the town. And as a result, council discussed it and wanted staff to kind of research it, to kind of bring the facts to light. And so we've done that and kind of given you a list of, since November 2017, there have been 13 notices of violation of this. Talked to our police chief and our code enforcement officer. You see there what other neighboring jurisdictions do. Waxhaw, Matthews, Indian Trail, Wesley Chapel, Unionville, and Mineral Springs. And then 3 different options for the council to choose from. And some recommendations there. So I don't want to be long-winded. I don't want to reiterate what y'all probably already read. So happy to answer any questions or have a dialogue or anything that might be helpful so that the council can make an informed decision.
All right, well, I think we need to do something, not be number one. David?
I'm in favor of making the change to allow basketball goals with a list of conditions, but the one in particular I'm less happy with is that it's 35 miles an hour street. I would have no problem with a 25 mile an hour street speed limit.
Because that's what our subdivision, speed limits are anyway.
35 is, unfortunately, they're going faster than that frequently, and I think that might be not as safe as we might like, but I have no problem with changing it to 25 and the rest of those conditions.
So, so those conditions are similar to what Waxhaw has, it's just the base cannot be in the road, is that right?
Yes,
Yeah,
and so,
goal-based structure must be placed off the road, clear of utility boxes.
so this is the list that was developed, looking at what Waxhaw does and also talking with our code enforcement officer and our police department to ensure that it's done safely. Another issue that kind of came up when we were talking with the staff is, during the Turner's issue, obviously everybody in the neighborhood supported having the basketball there, so that there's a way to bring people together. But there are times when you get complaints about basketball hoops, and neighbors might not have that amicable relationship that the Turners have with their neighbors. And so put in there some rules for y'all to think about. So if there is any sort of conflict with the neighbors, that if there are enough complaints, and we can get rid of it. So that's where that kind of came up from. So we can keep that, we can remove it. It's completely original.
All righty, but no support for what, to adopt what Indian Trail, Wesley Chapel, Unionville, Mineral Springs has, just no ordinance whatsoever. Let's, all right. Well, let's go through the, if we do number 3, here are the conditions that, because you haven't seen this, have you?
Oh, I have.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, because I believe Alex sent an email to Jason Hayes, which was the other couple, Jason and Jenny were here as well. And he gave me a copy, so I have seen it, yes.
Are you okay with these conditions?
As long as we're getting our hoop back, we're good.
Well, you're getting it back, it's just the base cannot be in the street.
It was never in the street.
Never in the street.
Never in the street.
All right. All right. Well, David, can you make a motion then?
Make a motion that we change the ordinance, whatever that ordinance number is.
94.11.
Thank you. That we change that 94 point whatever to, based on the conditions listed below. Can we read them in?
Yeah, that's right.
Basketball goals are allowed on residential streets in accordance with the following conditions. Goals must be reasonable.
Do you want me to read it?
Oh, I got it.
Put your glasses on. Or brown.
I pinch my own thing here. Goals must be removable and not a permanent structure. Goal-based structure must be placed off the road and clear of utility boxes, light poles, sidewalks, or any other permanent structure. The speed limit on the road where the goal is located must be 25 miles an hour or lower. Goal must be in clear sight with no obstructions preventing drivers from identifying the goal from a safe distance away. The goal or activities associated with the goal received 3 complaints in a 12-month period, verified by the Stallings Police Department or the Stallings Code Enforcement Officer. The goal must be removed and will be disallowed at the property. If at any time, Stallings Police Department or Stallings Code Enforcement Officer view the goal to be a health and safety risk or a nuisance to the community for any reason, the goal must be removed.
I'll second.
All righty, so that last, the second to last bullet there, it has 3 complaints. I like, if it's determined by the Stallings Police Department and Stallings Code Enforcement, that was legitimate complaints, I think I want to know.
Be angry what
Be
they're
angry that they were just
picking.
complaining, so let's have some common sense there. So, all right,
How would we amend that second to last bullet? Let me delete it.
yeah, I just like the last part, if at any time the Stallings Police Department or the Code Enforcement Officer, view the goal to be a health or safety risk, it's just a goal.
I'm going to amend my motion to delete that bullet of if goal or activities, etc. So that, yes, 3 complaint bullet is not in there.
All right.
There's 5 remaining bullets, and that will be my motion.
All right.
I'll second that. I would totally agree. I was going to ask that question, like, how are they going to verify it? Because if it's just a neighbor that is aggravated because kids are playing ball,
Right.
that's not right for them to have that kind of control, that all they have to do is complain 2 times and, okay, your goal's
Well,
gone.
without that bullet, can it be removed on the first complaint, at the discretion of the police department or the
No,
code
because
officer?
it's
Yes.
talking about the health and safety risk or a nuisance to the community for any reason. I think that common sense would prevail with our police and our safety code, Stallings Code Enforcement Officer.
All right. Well, I like it too. So we have a motion and a second to change the ordinance to allow basketball goals based on the list of conditions, and we deleted the one that has the 3 complaints, everything else stands. So all in favor? And that's unanimous. All right.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Joyce?
Mayor, if I may, just to follow up, what we'll do is we'll get with Melanie and back on the ordinance. And obviously pull off this course, until that's enacted. There are 13 folks, 13 notices that we gave out. So once that ordinance is passed, we'll have Colin contact folks that received those notices and let them know the ordinance has been changed.
All right. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. All right, next up is the pay classification study, and Ms. Brown's here. And Karen, appreciate you being here tonight.
You just made it. Those girls.
The middle one is my daughter, so she's pretty good.
Wow.
That's okay.
You got major brother voice.
Tough act to follow.
Well, thank you, Mayor and members of Town Council. Thank you for having me tonight. My name is Cheryl Brown. I'm a consultant with the MAPS group, and I've put a brochure at your desk that will provide you a little bit more information about the work that we do. And the town engaged MAPS, I guess, toward the end of 2018. And work actually started on site in February, and I'm here now to present to you a couple of different documents, and that's all of that clutter that you have in front of you is thanks to Karen and thanks to me. So I promise I won't go through it page for page. I'm just going to kind of skim through it quickly with you tonight, give you an opportunity to digest it, and then I'll be back in May if you have any questions, and we can address them at that time. Tell you a little bit about MAPS. It's been doing consulting work in the public sector human resources field since the mid-'80s. I joined the team in January of 2018. I retired after 30 years of local government human resources experience. I spent 24 of those years with the city of Charlotte, 6 of those years with the city of Monroe. So I'm not too far down the road from you all. And since January of 2018, I've done several projects, paid classification studies with the MAPS team, and I appreciate Stallings engaging MAPS to do the work. I think it's very forward thinking with you all, and thank you for supporting your manager in his efforts. The first thing that we're going to address tonight is your personnel policy, and Karen really has carried the load with that. The town had asked MAPS to review the current policy that you all had, And my understanding from the team here is that was adopted back in June of 2017 after a very comprehensive review and input from mayor and town council. So congratulations for that work, because I know it takes a lot of time and effort. So it was not my intent to come in and do a wholesale change for your policy, because it was in very good shape. So what I was asked to do was look at it from a compliance perspective and maybe update some best practices from the human resources area. So there are very few substantive changes, and Karen has done a great job highlighting those for you. What she did, you have in front of you the full policy, but in the appendix, the areas that have had changes are highlighted in yellow, and the actual page number associated with the change to the policy is noted as well. The rest of the page numbers haven't been numbered because we want to get it right before we finish the full sequence of page numbering. So just to point out for you the major changes that you will find in there. The first thing that caught my eye was the town's FMLA policy and family medical leave. And the policy was contained in there, but it was written from the private sector perspective. So there are different legal requirements from a public sector perspective. So that was really the first thing and the most significant change for me in looking at the policy. That policy has been added as part of the appendix, which is at the very end of the book for you. And I know it's a lot of pages, so that's, I'll go through that quickly. Secondly, the military leave and USERA information in the policy, we expanded that so that it was more comprehensive, another federal requirement that we just scrolled before you. We did some work with probationary periods and looking at probationary periods from lengths of time, as well as how do you handle a probationary period from a pay perspective for your employees. And then finally, as a result of the work that Max did in the second notebook that we're going to go to, we added a full section for you, section 7 in your policy manual, that addresses the physician classification plan. So those really are there are other little tweaks in there in the policy, and you'll see those. I mean, it's a very easy read, frankly. But those are the 4 areas that we made more substantial changes. And then the next notebook that's in front of you is actually the report that I prepared. It's a typical report presented to mayors and town councils and town boards by the Max team. And I just want to walk you through that, again, not to dive into the detail of the report, but to point out the particular sections for you. The very first thing in the front pocket that you will see is actually a letter that is written from me to you, mayor and members of town council, that talks about the pay philosophy for your town manager. That may be something that you've discussed in the past, or maybe not, but it's just recommendations that we make to boards as to how to consider and look at compensation for town managers. And then the second piece, a couple of pages in, is going to be the transmittal letter that was written from me to Alex, talking about the report and the various sections of the report that you find as you go through there. And then the third section, which is going to be before that first blue tab that you see, is going to contain some updated organizational charts and info on study methodology. And let me just take a breath right here and talk to you about the study methodology and what we do. So the reason that organizations have maps come in to look at their pay structure, their jobs, the work that their employees doing, they ask us to come in, make sure that the employees, that we understand completely the type of work that the employees are doing. So we spend time, one thing that we did in the very beginning was ask your staff to complete position description questionnaires and lesson. Those are like 6 or 7 page documents, and it takes a lot of effort, and they were great. So they did a very comprehensive job with their PDQs, which is what we call them for short. And then it's my responsibility to come in and sit down and pretty much talk to all of your employees just to review that information with them make sure that I clearly understand the work that they do, and then I take that back with me, and then I start the writing process. And in the very front of your report there behind your first tab, which says report, there'll be, I don't know, a 12 to 15 page document in there that summarizes the work that your staff does here at the City of Stallings. So that's gleaned from information provided in PDQs as well as those in-person interviews. And then what we do as an organization, I talked with Alex early on and I said, okay, who are you losing people to? When your employees are leaving the town of Stallings, where are they going? So that was one of the things that we considered when we looked around you to determine who we wanted to survey. We actually gathered pay plans, we talked to people from other jurisdictions, and it's basically, how much do you pay a police officer, Town of Matthews? How much do you pay a police officer, City of Monroe? So we go out and we start looking at that pay salary information. And then we bring that back in and put that into an Excel spreadsheet. And what I do as a consultant in this area, and you'll see when you look a little closer, I included Charlotte, I included Mecklenburg County, and I included Union County. When you include those jurisdictions of that size, you've got to make some adjustment for how much those organizations skew an average. So when you get into the pay information, you'll see that there are two sets of averages on the salary surveys. One of them includes those three large jurisdictions, and the other average does not. So we do take into account how much organizations of that size can skew pay results. And then also for your senior level managers and your department heads, and I'll pick on Lynn since she's here, but we have to, with your department heads in particular, consider those jurisdictions around you that are most comparable, your Waxhaws, your Pinegals, because the breadth and the depth of the knowledge and the work that those smaller jurisdictions do is a lot different than what a Charlotte planning director does. So we do take into account those types of differences between jurisdictions. So I don't want it to scare you that you'll see Charlotte and Mecklenburg County and Union County in those survey results, because we do consider that when we're coming back to you and making recommendations on pay ranges for your jobs. So I'd like to now point out a particular page number for you, and that would be page 18. And it's going to be behind the first tab under report recommendations. It's going to be the book that's got the plastic window on the front of it. Yeah, that one. So on page 18, I believe that'll show you. Does that have the list of towns and cities on it?
It does.
Okay, very good. That's what I thought. I just want to double check. So you see there the towns and cities that we used in looking for salary comparisons for the town of Stallings. And we talked about how we take into account those larger jurisdictions. And then as a result of the information gathered, I talked with Alex, I shared the data with him, and made some proposals as far as the types of the job classifications that you all would now have here for the town of Stallings, whether those would change, whether they wouldn't. Frankly, there were very few that changed for you all, but what we have done is we've been able to update your salary ranges, your pay ranges associated with the work that those folks do. And then on page 19, we then come back to Alex and we say, okay, this is what we've got. And we looked actually at 4 different options for implementation of the study. And you'll see option 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what we discussed was option 4, and I'll bring that one to your attention because that is our recommendation, and that is the least expensive option for implementation of the study. And option 4 recognizes your employees, moving all of your new employees into the new pay range to which they'll be assigned, and recognizing employees with a 0.5% increase per year of service in the particular position in which they currently hold. And I'll explain to you why that's important. Because I did a study back in the fall in the town of Columbus, and they had a public works director who'd been the public works director for 2 years. So he'd been making a higher salary as Public Works Director, but he'd come up through the ranks after 17 years as a Public Works Technician. So you base it, now as a director, he's making more money. So if I had based his new salary on time with the organization, he'd have been way up in the pay range because it would have been based on 19 years, as opposed to placing him in the new range based on his 2 years as the director. So that's why a lot of times that's the recommendation that we will come back with, so that it accurately reflects the amount of time that a person has served in a particular role. So you can see there with option 4, the cost that is tied to the implementation of that option is $54,358 for a full year, which is 2.6% of your payroll. And of that, I understand that your police personnel were of a major concern for you, losing offices to other jurisdictions. Of that 54,000, 43,097 of that is allocated for sworn law enforcement. So almost 80% of those adjustments that we're recommending are for your sworn police officers. So do want to bring that to your attention. And then also in that section, you'll find some graphs and distribution graphs of where your employees fall in their ranges, a salary schedule, which is actually the new pay plan that we're proposing for you, a list of job classifications assigned to the new grades that we're proposing for you, and then finally in that section, the actual salary survey, the Excel spreadsheet that we put together that will show you who pays what, and the averages that were associated with those numbers, and then the grade assignments that we're recommending and what those grade assignments look like compared to those average figures that you can see on that page. And then the next piece of the report actually pertains to the policy, and we've already touched on that a little bit. It's a little bit different than what we usually do because you all had such a great policy already in place. I kind of took that first, but within the policy section, the blue tab that talks about policy, I have included some management recommendations for Alex and for you as the board. Really, those are fairly straightforward. There is one that I will bring to your attention that, based on a benefits survey that we also performed from the town, I would recommend that you make a minor tweak with your life insurance for your town staff. You currently offer a $15,000 life insurance benefit for staff who pass away. I'm recommending you move that to $30,000. And you can see the other jurisdictions around you and what those jurisdictions offer. And Karen did some research for Alex, and the amount of that change, I think, ended up being $2,100 a year. So it really is very minimal and could mean a whole lot to an employee and their family by making that very minor change. So that is recommendation number 7 under management recommendations. And then the third tab that you see there is class specifications, or class specs, maybe for short. Part of what we do when we do this type of work is we take the position description questionnaires, we take the results from our interviews, and then I go back and do more writing and prepare new job specifications for the town. Now, I didn't attach all of those new job specifications in that section for 2 very important reasons. I did give you a sample. I gave you the police officer sample. All of those will be provided to the town in electronic format, so that if there are any changes that are made, you all will certainly be able to make those and adjust as you need to. So I didn't include them for 2 reasons. One, it's a lot of trees, a lot of paper that would be in there, and impacts printing and those sorts of things. And secondly, I have not finished all of them. So, and I've talked with Alex about that. We're about halfway through with those. So we're finishing those up, and we'll provide them to the town within the next few weeks. And that really concludes really a quick and basic general overview of what you've got in front of you. And again, at this point, Alex has asked that I come back for the May 13 meeting and answer any questions that you may have. I'm happy to try and answer any of them that you have right now. I think, Alex, you were thinking questions, and then we could address questions between now and then in written format and get all of those out to the members of the board.
First of all, thank you, Sheriff, for all of your
You're
work.
welcome.
Karen said, your work as well. They spend a lot of time with this, as well as the staff. You know, obviously it's a lot of information, and I think what we would suggest, certainly if you have any questions for Cheryl, you know, she's here, please feel free to ask her. But I know it is a lot of information, take it back and read it. I would ask so that everybody has access to the same information. If you have a question, shoot it to me, and what we'll do is we'll kind of compile those questions, develop a list of answers, factual answers, and then provide that list of answers to everyone in the council, so everyone has access to the same information.
All right, and then I pulled my calendar out. I'd be more comfortable pushing down to the second meeting in May, having a full month to look at it. So Memorial Day is 27th, so we always push that back to the Tuesday meeting, right? 28th.
Sure.
I'm not going anywhere.
This gives a little bit more time. 2 weeks would not be enough time for me.
So much to absorb. A lot to absorb.
So I believe it's 28th, isn't it? All right, so we'll do
I think so, I don't believe I've got anything.
Do another Tuesday night, so.
That'd be fine, you know, the funny thing, I'm actually doing an interim HR director assignment for the city of Burlington. So, I'm supposed to be wrapping up there around the 1st of June, so it might work out that I'm back in Charlotte by then, or I'll just run down,
All right.
come back down on Tuesday night.
A couple thoughts I want to throw out there. You know, typically with this process, you're looking and they kind of come in and do a comprehensive personnel policy review. And we knew there was a lot of work that had already been done. We respect that because they did a great job. We just make some minor tweaks there. Also, with the total cost there, the salary information, it ends up to be about $54,000, I think the number was. That's in salary information. And when you tackle the cost of kind of benefits and insurance, things like that, you're looking at a little less, somewhere between about 65 and 70,000. And you get that 70,000 number in that operational budget already. So, you know, we've got that communications specialist position to save the town $54,300 looking at that right before I came in. And if you compare that to the salary that's in there, it's actually really close. I mean, it's less than $100 what it is. So a lot could be substituted. That money we save from cutting that position to help address the pay classification study. The third thing I wanted to mention to you guys is the way this all started is we're looking at police officer salaries. And we wanted to make sure our officers were compensated appropriately, so we weren't losing officers, so we could maintain those good officers and keep our community safe. And we talked about, so okay, we want to take a comprehensive look, so we won't go off break morale issues. And close to 80% of the recommended changes are 2 police officers. So I say all that to say you guys are right.
Yeah, I know if you have questions, I'd recommend just getting with Alex and Karen one-on-one, and understanding, because this is a lot of information, so that's probably what I'll do. Just teach y'all to walk through. Good.
Mr. Mayor, can I just say one thing? I just want to give a shout out to Regis Griffin, because he was the one that just delved in and, hi Regis. Delved into that personnel policy and just gave his heart and soul. And so for her to say that there are a few minor changes, because none of us had that background, and those that were on the committee did not have that expertise background. And even when we started looking at our salaries, 4+ years ago, we knew that we were not experts. And so to have somebody come in and tell us, okay, we're not horribly far off from what we were just going as lay people, and coming up with the range of
salary. I'm so thankful for just in his direction and his guidance doing that, so it was
Thanks for remembering that.
a labor of love for him.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you, Karen.
Sure. Thank you, Karen.
All right, next up is the Lynn with the Idlewild Development, preliminary informational session. And I think we've got some folks here that are citizens of Stallings that want to either hear, but we've already had our public comments period, but if somebody wants to speak, we might rearrange the order here and do something. Go ahead, Lynn.
Mayor, members of council, I'm here this evening to present to you all our first development agreement. We've been talking about these for well over a year now, and we are at a point where we are ready to present one to you all. This evening is just for information purposes only. We are not looking for any recommendations. This is not the public hearing. We will be bringing this back to you all on May the 13th for the actual public hearing. So I'm just going to walk you through this process. I included in my presentation a copy of the development agreement process that council adopted. We adopted this, we put it in our development ordinance, so it's part of our procedures. And where we are this evening is phase 5. We have gone through the first 4 phases of the process, and we are at phase 5. We are bringing this to you tonight. There's actually a copy of the draft development agreement in your packet. Melanie did want me to point out to you all this evening that that is just a draft, and we will be making some changes to that. But we wanted you to have that so you can see what it was going to look like and the conditions as they're currently written are in there as well. I wanted to give you all a little bit of background information, especially for Mr. Burt, who wasn't here when we adopted all of these plans. This project this evening is part of our Idlewild small area plan. And the property that we're looking at is located in this area here. This is where the current Idlewild Market Shopping Center is. And the properties that we're looking at are located in this area. The project is in compliance with that small area plan. These properties call for higher density residential development, for townhomes, for apartments. So the project is in compliance with the small area plan. Some of the goals that we looked at when we adopted this, we were looking for, we want increased densities. One of the things the town has had a goal of trying to do for several years now is to attract more commercial development. And one of the ways that we have to do, or we need to do that, or the only way we're going to accomplish that, is to increase the number of rooftops in town. So these small area plans, we looked at these areas specifically for areas where we could incorporate higher density housing into these areas. We also wanted there to be connectivity and walkability. The plan that you're going to see this evening, we've worked very closely and very diligently with this developer on ensuring that that connectivity is provided, as well as other goals, such as creating streetscape and bringing those buildings to the street and connecting to existing developments in the area. So all of these are things that we've taken into consideration and worked hard on. So with that, I'm going to move forward with my presentation. Just to give you some background, this plan was submitted on August 31st. So you can see we've been working on this for quite a while. We originally had a TRC meeting. What that stands for is the Technical Review Committee. That is made up of people that work for the county, as well as department heads here at the town. Our Parks and Rec Director, Public Works was included, our police chief, fire chief. They were all invited to come and sit down, look at the plan, and give us some comments. Staff also looked at it. And from this meeting, we provided the applicant with just some technical comments as to street right-of-way and police needs, and potential fire needs, so that they can incorporate those into the plan before they move forward. So that was done on September 24th. We had an initial staff meeting, which was the first time that we as staff sat down with the applicant. That meeting included our consultant, our town engineer, Alex, and myself, and we started that negotiation process. We actually had 4 of those meetings with this applicant. There were a lot of changes done to this site plan. They were very willing to work with us on that. Every time they came back, we had more comments, and they incorporated those into that site plan, and we feel like that we came up with a very good product. And then finally, this did go to the council subcommittee on March the 15th. Ms. Romano, as well as Mr. Martin and Ms. Paxton were involved in that. It was a lengthy meeting. There was a lot to discuss, but I feel like we lot accomplished. And then this went to planning board last week. So the planning board has already voted on this and they recommended approval. So here we are this evening. The properties that we're looking at are outlined here in red. These are the exact properties. I do want to point out that this piece here, this is the county line. This piece here is unincorporated and will have to be annexed. So you also will hear an annexation of that 3 acres when this comes to you for public hearing on May 13th. This is the actual site plan. Just to kind of give you an idea of what it includes. It's a total of 80 acres. And that includes property in the town of Matthews as well as the town of Stallings. The Stallings side includes, the Matthews side involves 121 townhome units. In Stallings, there's 127 townhomes, 260 apartments, and 7 buildings. The apartment buildings are in this area, the townhomes are here, and then there's also a retail component in this area, which is around 3 acres in size. This map shows you where the county line is. This pink dashed line right here, this side of the project is actually the town of Matthews, and then this is the Stallings portion. Like I said, in your packet, there's a copy of the development agreement. And in an attempt to help us digest this a little bit better and help you feel like you're not drinking water from a fire hose, I've broken this down into categories. There's 6 of them in the development agreement, and I'm going to walk you through each of those and sort of hit the high points of each one. The first one is uses. We also talk about transportation improvements and parking, as well as streetscape treatments, greenway and open space, architectural standards, and then there's several exhibits that will be included with the agreement. I do have a copy of those. I don't believe those are in your packet. Those are mostly just maps, but I do have a copy of those on the presentation slides if you'd like to see them. So the 3 areas. When we talk about uses, we labeled each of the 3 areas separately. This here's Area A, and it includes the 150 townhomes. Area B is in this area, that's where your apartments are going to be located. And then here, that letter should slide down to the side, but that's your retail portion as well. And in the development agreement on that retail section, that commercial pod, we also list uses there that could potentially be located. So those are really the main things that are outlined in the development agreement when it comes to uses. It's just basically stating these are the uses that are allowed here and they will not exceed this number. Transportation improvements and parking. I think this is probably the area that we spent most of our time discussing. There was a lot to be discussed here, and so there was a lot in the agreement that talks about roads. The main one is the agreement ties the development to the street layout as you see it on the plan. So in other words, when this comes in for permitting, the streets aren't going to change. What you see on that plan is what the developers agree to and that what they will be building. The second thing is that it requires all the streets and the alleyways to be built to specifications that are shown on the adopted cross sections that you all adopted as part of that small area plan. Those roads within the small area plans have specific cross sections, which has some different requirements than just your typical streets. There's things on there such as multi-use paths, on-street parking, some of the lanes are more narrow, some of the streets have tree wells in them, that type of thing. So they have agreed to that and those streets are tied to those cross sections. Also the improvement of the existing public streets will provide for the primary connection from the development area, in other words, the project, to Idlewild Road. The signal that's currently the entry road for the Harris Teeter will be the main entrance into this project, but that road will also be the main entrance for any development that occurs across the street. So we wanted to be very sensitive and very aware of the fact that whatever happens at that intersection is going to impact the properties across the street as well. So the developer will be putting in turn lanes so that you can turn left and right onto Idlewild Road, as well as a through lane. So that is part of the agreement as well. On that entry road, there's I'm sorry?
Where is that in the agreement? Which?
It's under the transportation section, and we're talking about this road here. And on that road, the other thing I was going to point out is that there's also a multi-use path and on-street parking as part of that cross-section here. And that's all in the agreement. Another thing that we discussed, and Mayor, I'm sure that you'll remember this because you've been on the council for a while, but there were discussions at one point that this road, that road that runs behind the Harris Teeter, would someday become a town-maintained road, and that it would provide connectivity to properties that front Stallings Road and open all of that property up for development. So that's been something, that's been a goal of the town for many years. So we wanted to ensure that connection was made. So the developer agreed. Making that connection is not going to be simple. There's a lot of wetlands on this property, and that road, that connection is going to have to be bridged. And when I say bridged, I don't mean a pipe. I mean, there's actually going to have to be a bridge built there. So the developer has agreed to contribute $125,000 towards that connection. So when the adjoining property does develop, with the funds that they've provided and the funds from that other developer, that road and that bridge can be built and we'll have that connectivity. That's something that'll be.
Can you give me some perspective on what you're talking about, the connectivity to Stallings Road, because
I may have to pull up the maps to show you, but this road right here will come in, and this is where that bridge will happen. Do you know where the big mountain of dirt is on Stallings Road, that Bob's property?
Yeah.
That's this piece of land here. And what this road will do is it will come in, our goal is, once this is developed, is to bring that road across that wetland area and connect into here. So that would give people the ability to go from Stallings Road to Idlewild without having to use Stevens Mill. It wouldn't have to come around that way and use that light. So it will cut down on some traffic in that area, and it will provide for that future connection.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, I saw the $125,000, what if that's their part, and the other developer, what if it costs more than, well, for the bridge, that costs more than funds that we're getting?
I guess we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it.
Well, I want to be able to get, I don't want the town to have to pay a nickel, so I want that.
And I think that, and if I'm correct, we did get an estimate from our town engineer on what he thought that bridge would cost, and I believe that was that about half, Alex, that 125? So we felt like, I mean, of course, that's in today's money, but that was something that we did take into consideration.
We'll talk about transportation. Can you explain the connector road? What, there's a reference in here about a connector road.
Yep, I'm getting ready to talk about that. Right here. This is a road that was actually, or just a connection that was actually supposed to happen when this shopping center was built, and for some reason it never did. So the developer has agreed to provide that connection here. This is the 7-Eleven. This will be that commercial tract, the 3 acres, and then they're going to bring this road in so that people that live in this area can easily access the shopping center. As you all are aware, this shopping center has struggled for a long time. There's a lot of empty spaces here, as well as a lot of turnover. So the owner of the shopping center is very excited about this project. It feels like that it will just further spur development. So those are the connections that will be made. So connectivity was a really important thing that we talked about through our planning processes with the small area plan and the comp plan, and we feel like there's a lot of connections being made here.
Now, does Auto Bell know about that?
Probably, I don't know. The shopping center knows.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously that intersection is a tough one anyway, where they come out of Auto Bell, there's nobody there now, but now there'll be a lot more traffic coming out there. I'm sure Auto Bell will like it, because there'll be more traffic towards their business, but, it's gonna be a dangerous intersection.
What,
Mark my
are you
word.
talking about here?
Yeah, well, the one coming out, when you turn left out of Auto Bell going back out, now it's gonna have a right turn out of the apartment complex. I know I have stop signs up, but.
I mean, there's a lot of potential here if you're bringing this road in. I mean, there could potentially even be more buildings, placed here facing that road.
Plus
So,
the intersection, when they come to the stop
you
sign,
talking about this also?
no, behind the Wells Fargo.
Yes, here.
Is that one?
Yeah.
Is that the Wells Fargo? I mean, that's a horrible intersection
It
too.
needs to
Yeah,
be
the line of
improved.
sight's terrible.
Yeah, the line of sight is bad, so we're gonna have to
Mhm.
either rip out some shrubs or something.
That's private property, I don't know if we can.
No,
We could always have that conversation with the owner.
I will say this, that, we met with the owner, actually,
Yeah.
he wanted to meet with us a couple times, and to say they were supportive of this project is like saying Richard Simmons is a little peppy.
Oh, wow.
They really, they met with us multiple times and view this as a guide, so they see the commercial sector there a lot of times struggling, and they see that as a big boost to their business, and maybe shared some preliminary ideas about maybe redeveloping some areas in there, maybe trying to add businesses, restaurants, that kind of thing. So they're real supportive. And so I say that to say, if we've got a concern like that with them, I think they'd be very receptive and open to addressing some of those concerns based on our conversations.
And just to kind of piggyback on what Alex said, that was something that was kind of neat about this process, is that it gave us the opportunity to engage adjoining property owners and get them involved in the discussion, especially where it affected their properties. So that was kind of neat to see that work.
Lynn, may I just interrupt you for just a moment?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor, if you look at page 4 of the development agreement, and you have the section 5, which is dealing with the transportation, go to letter C, capital letter C.
So I'm on page 4.
Okay, so do you see letter C there? Okay, do you see where it says Exhibit B?
Right.
Okay, that is the sentence to improve the primary entrance road in accordance with the cross-section on Exhibit B. And if you go back to Exhibit B, it will show you that there's a lane coming in, which you're going to scroll almost to the back. There's a lane coming in off of Idlewild, and then you have a left turn lane, a straight through, and a right turn lane on the exhibit. I think that was something that, at least if I remember correctly, that sometimes a picture is easier to understand than the verbiage.
Yes,
And so
agreed.
that was what we said, we were going to put a picture there so everybody can see it, but it's very clear. You've got a lane coming in, you've got little like arrows to the left, there's your left turn, straight across, and here's your right turn on Exhibit B.
Right, yeah, I see
At the
that,
back.
yeah, on the primary road.
Right. So I just wanted you to know, when you said, is it in the development agreement, it's there, it's just as a picture, not.
And it should be in the language as well. It
Yeah.
should be referenced under the transportation and parking section on the conditions as well. But you're correct, a picture does help tremendously. Thank you for pointing that out. Sorry. No, thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Streetscape treatment. These are the conditions that really make the development look nice. These are things that we wanted to include in the project to ensure that that it was attractive, that it was a quality development. So some of the things that are included in here are on-street parking, especially on that main street coming into the development. There's street trees and there's street wells as well in the main street. The street wells are what you see in uptown Charlotte. When you have a tree in the sidewalk, there's a grate around it so water can get through there. There's stamped concrete crosswalks and intersections. There's monumentation, stamped concrete, and enhanced landscaping is what we call the bridge, but it's really just an area where there's a creek running through and it's piped. And we just ask them to provide some, small brick columns, as well as some landscaping that would make it feel more like a bridge. There's also decorative street lighting and a landscape berm between the building where it's adjacent to the Vickery neighborhood. But just to kind of give you an idea of where these things are located, that berm is right here. And actually, this is really the only area where it's directly adjacent to Vickery. So we wanted to make sure that this buffering was good, and that it was going to prevent any type of headlights or anything like that from shining into any homes, and that there would really be a nice buffer there, a berm there, that would protect those property owners. On-street parking, as I stated earlier, is on this entrance road, as well as that multi-use path. You will have a stamped concrete crosswalk in this area. You'll have some stamped concrete here, as well as here, even though that's on the Matthew side, but that will be carried through. And then when I was talking about those bridge treatments, I was talking about this area right here. So that you'll have some enhanced landscaping, as well as some small column walls to kind of make that feel like a bridge. So those were things that we felt were very important to the project. Your decorative lighting will be on the main roads here and here. So you'll have some decorative lighting. There's also going to be a park space here as you come in this entrance, there'll be a park at the end. These are also pocket parks kind of spread throughout the project. So, and well, there's a lot of detention facilities that'll be ponds or wet ponds. So greenways and open space. This project has a lot of greenways in it. This is something that personally I'm very excited to see happen. The developer has agreed to the construction and donation of greenway trails throughout the site that will tie into and become a part of our greenway system. None of these trails actually show on our greenway plan, but the Vickery Trail does connect to this property, which is the trail that will go behind the Vickery neighborhood. The town owns that land, and they have even enhanced that by adding more trails. They've also agreed to construct an on-street trailhead for the town at that signalized roadway, which will include on-street parking as well as signage in that area. And basically where that will be is if this is on-street parking in this area, there'll also be greenway signage here so that people can come to this location, they can park their cars, they can walk down or ride their bikes down that multi-use path into the project and then get on that Vickery Greenway Trail right here. The developer will be constructing this trail to their property line. Can't see the bottom, but the Vickery Trail will be down here. So once that's constructed and our portion's constructed, you'll be able to walk or ride your bike from the Blair Mill neighborhood all the way to Iowa Market. And then there's other trails that are located throughout the development. There's one that runs here, there's one here, and then they're also putting in a sidewalk that goes down to Ridges so that people can walk to that restaurant and to the shopping center. So those are things that I think are going to really enhance not just this project, but the town as a whole.
Then can we go back to that picture?
Yes, sir.
And talk about, so the blue at the bottom of the development, those are detention stormwater ponds?
Yes.
All of them are?
Yes.
They all are? You know, we get a lot of complaints from Vickery about flooding, and I know it's on the west side, farthest away from this development, but we would find the developer to look at any flooding issues that would come from runoff from this property over the detention ponds into Vickery?
They can address those questions. There are engineers here this evening,
Okay.
and that's a good question, and I think that's something that's important that we address. Hopefully this area will not affect Vickery just because of the topography in this area, but I will let their engineer address that if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, we'll do it again.
and then architectural standards. This was something we also had a lot of conversation about. There's multifamily buildings and then there's townhome buildings. Multifamily buildings, we looked at a couple of different renderings that they presented to staff, and we agreed upon one. We really felt like because of the location of this project, because of its proximity to that shopping center as well as its proximity to the interstate, that it needed to have a little bit more of an urban feel to it just because of where it is. So we have an elevation that was included in your packet that staff and the subcommittee agreed upon, and that will be part of the development agreement and will be attached, and those buildings will be built to those standards. Elevations for the townhomes will be tied to the architectural standards that are in your packet. We went through a lengthy list of architectural standards. Our consultant was very involved in that. He has an architectural background and provided us some assistance there. So those townhomes will have to also come back for town council, when they actually have those renderings ready to present to you all so that you all can approve them. Apartment ceilings have to be at least 9 feet in height in the apartment buildings. And then there'll also be a fountain installed in that development area C at the entrance to the project here, so that it creates an entry feature. So these are just some of the highlights, but there's other things in there. These are just the main ones.
And what is field brick?
I'm sorry?
Field brick in the drawing here? It says, I know what accent brick is, but what is field brick?
That's a good question. You may know that. I'm assuming it's just a brick that has more of a weathered look to
I
it.
think that's the gist of it, yeah, won't claim to be an expert, but I think that's kind of the gist, is this a certain style. Yeah.
But it's regular brick. It is brick.
It's brick, yeah.
It's not faux brick.
It's not faux brick. No faux brick. Good question. So these are the architectural renderings for those apartments. And just
Yeah,
to kind of,
that's where it says field brick.
Right.
You know, up there.
And just to go back to that site plan, just to kind of give you an idea of how this is gonna feel, those buildings will front this road, and they'll be very close to the road. You'll have on-street parking, you'll have a sidewalk, you'll have street trees, and you'll have that decorative lighting. So as you come into the project, you'll have a very urban feel to it. And these buildings will be, I believe they're gonna be at that 41 feet that we approved, so that they'll probably be about 3 stories, 4 stories. So what are the next steps? So this evening, we're here to have this discussion, and we wanted to present the project to you and introduce it to you. The applicant is here, so I'm gonna turn it over to them so that they can answer any questions you may have. Once we're finished with this meeting here this evening, we will advertise this for public hearing on May 13th. And we will bring the final document to you. It will be in final form. Once you all have adopted it, the mayor will sign it, and it will become a legally binding document that's tied to the property. So that's where we are in the process. And if you have any questions for me, I'll be glad to answer those.
Any questions for Lynn? Now, the TIA, is that later on, or?
Well, it was something that we used, that's a good question. We used that to come up with a lot of the improvements that were needed within the project.
Right.
So those are included as conditions.
Now, what about the improvements on Ottawa Road now that we got the Super Street? Idea there that they want to make improvements or changes, not improvements, sorry, wrong word. So how's that going to work out as far as, obviously there's going to be a lot more traffic coming out of
Right. That's a good
Ottawa
point.
Road.
So one thing I'll mention is DOT, as we've gone through and talked with them about Ottawa Road, they've adjusted for our small area plans. And so there'll be a right in, right out up there at the more northern end, closest to 485. And then at the Harris Teeter intersection, because of our small area plans, I believe that was originally scheduled to be some sort of super street, probably something that we didn't want. Because of our conversations in our small area plans, we know they're willing to give us full access at that intersection, which will help accommodate this.
Well, you talk about, is there going to be 3 entrances now? Or just 2?
Two, yes, sir.
So 2's already there, the one by the Wells Fargo,
Correct.
and which is right in, right out already.
Right.
And then the one that's already there, the lighting there. So, I mean, I just want to know what improvements are going to be made on.
Sure.
So we don't want super street, we're all, we're doing battle with DOT on that, but there's going to have to be some improvements to allow for this many cars coming.
Sure.
On that.
And there are, and what we can do is get you all a list of those transportation improvements. I think that some of them are listed in the development agreement. But what we can do is maybe just clarify what those are.
Yeah, if we can get a map,
Okay.
like Debbie said, easier to do.
Yes, I'm happy to talk through some of that too. If we can
Sure.
pull up an arrow, we can
Any
zoom out
questions?
a little bit further
Any
and talk
questions
about
for
that.
Lynn?
I don't
On page 27 of the slide,
It's the side, it's exhibit, just the
1,
exhibit.
2, 3, number 4 down on what you're, what's there.
The fourth slide?
Well, it's
One,
number
oh, sorry,
7.
number 17.
Page 27?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's,
yeah.
that building there at the top. I know we changed the ordinance to be 4 stories, but isn't that minimum a little higher than?
That's possibly is that when the
That's
elevator crossing is?
Yeah, that's the elevator tower, that's just the elevator tower, it's the actual structure.
And that's not included in the building height.
It's already right in.
Since part of this property is Ms. Matthews and their access is going to that upper, more goes toward the 45 portion, or access point, who would Matthews Police and Fire respond to that area, and what about school impacts? Has any big consideration been given to
The
the
county's
school?
been contacted, about this, and this is in,
Stallings.
Stallings Elementary, Porter Ridge, which, Porter Ridge is at capacity.
It's always a.
And Stallings is not. Stallings Elementary is below capacity. So,
And then if a bus has to get through there, just as long as the roads are wide enough for a turnaround, and either, I know we're not concerned with Mecklenburg, but just how we know with community park, we responded to the stuff in Mecklenburg, even though it wasn't ours, we still did. So as long as the Mecklenburg side and our side had a coordinated a bus and a turnaround for a bus.
And the police and fire have both been consulted on this
Okay.
and given us comments, and Kevin Regoli, fire marshal, felt very comfortable with the road layout. And this is very similar to Shanawara in this area, because this is the same line that runs right through the Shanawara neighborhood. You know, that backside is in Mecklenburg County. I don't know if it's in the town of Matthews, but it's in Mecklenburg County.
If I may.
All right, any other questions for Lynn? You will, all right?
What we're doing, do you have the fire and police impact in the school departments? Do you have those when they would be available?
I'm sorry?
The school, what Sean asked about, like the school.
That was that TRC, the Technical Review Committee. All of those departments were provided a copy of the plan, and they provided responses. And that was included in the information that we provided to the applicant, so that they could make changes to their site plan. They responded to those comments. So,
Any other questions? You all right?
Are those reports available if they wanted to be looked at with a copy of what the
I
school
don't know if
and
it's a
fire
report,
police?
but I could give you the comments, yes.
Keep in mind with those comments, though, the site plan has been adjusted to affect those comments.
It's been modified to respond to the comments from the three.
Which is a little bit different
entities.
than what we're used to seeing, because typically it's a rezoning, and we're weighing those options as we're looking at making changes. With this, you know, we got the comments up front, so they can be incorporated into the plan before we even brought it to you guys.
That is a little different.
It's very different. Very different.
All right, thanks, Lynn.
Thanks everyone for all the good questions, I appreciate it.
All right, if you can just give us your name and.
Yeah,
the firm.
sure. My name is Michael Feber, I'm the engineer working on the project with Todd and John here. I'm with Mint Hill 6720 Hollow Drive. We're in Charlotte and been excited to be part of this and working with the town on this for the last 6 or 8 months, and we're really excited to see it get to this point. And I hope that, happy to answer any other questions that you guys have, or touch on some of the things you guys just kind of talked about there in a little bit more detail, whatever I can try to answer for you.
Any attention on it, the Vickery before.
Yeah, so I guess on the ponds, it was kind of brought up, just state and local codes prevent us from increasing the rate of runoff on their property. We're not allowed to. We have to show that we've controlled that flooding with these ponds in order to get a permit break ground.
Now, what if like the Vickery on the other, coming from the other side of the neighborhood, what if these ponds breach and it's not, will you all come back and fix them, or what's the policy there, what's the process?
I guess in the unlikely event of something like that, I think there's some type of maintenance agreement that gets entered into with the town on a pond facility of that type as part of the site plan approval process. That's the common practice I'm aware of.
That's how it goes down here.
Yeah, we need to include that in the agreement, that's spelled out clearly, because, we've had 100 and 500 year flood in the last 2 years, 3 years, and so who knows when the next one's gonna hit, and we just need to protect ourselves from all the development that's happening.
So I do believe there's
This is
a,
not a runoff that's gonna come off this property.
I do believe there's a requirement in the ordinance that requires that the HOAs expand the maintenance agreement and inspection, that kind of thing.
I think there's something in the development agreement that references that we're still responsible for getting all necessary permits and such, which would then fall under that category and cover you as part of the agreement, I think.
Well, the other thing, Lynn, I saw where in there, it said this development agreement expires in 15 years. I don't want that to happen with this thing on the ponds. Gets filled up with sediment, the next thing you know is.
I think that I think all of that is addressed in our stormwater ordinance. It talks about maintenance and how those will be maintained.
Okay.
and that it's the responsibility, that there's a maintenance agreement that has to be entered into with the town. So that's something that we do. So
Okay.
even if this does expire, they still, that stormwater ordinance does not.
All right.
So,
And Lynn, would the point of that be that they have 15 years to build this? I mean, to me,
yeah.
it's not that everything goes away, it's just that if the economy were to change, they would have 15 years to complete.
And upon the expiration of 15 years, they'd have to come back and they have to.
That's true.
Now, did you have a presentation for us, or you just want to answer some questions?
Mainly here just answer, I think we've covered everything, you know, that we would have put up, so there really wasn't much of no point to have anything additional, but yeah, I just wanted to talk about some of the specific stuff that we wanted, that she brought up, or you brought up, or her presentation. Bonds was one of them, as well as
DOT.
Oh, sure, so the DOT, so I can kind of point to some of this on here, but I actually need a bigger aerial to talk about it. I can go to Google,
You can escape that, yeah.
just go to Google Maps here real quick.
DOT's gonna have to approve, get you.
Yeah, so in addition to the town's review, both the towns of Matthews and Stallings reviewed the traffic, the TIA that was submitted, had comments, which we, worked through with them over the last 8 months, in addition to the DOTs from both Mecklenburg and Union County, because it's again across the county line, so we've had the 4 different agencies looking at that just for some background. And then DOT will have to approve the road improvements that are being made. I'm just trying to get to the right, here we go. DOT will ultimately have to approve road improvements along Ottawa Road as part of that. They've reviewed the TIA once, they offered very minimal comments, and just in my opinion. To go over those improvements, we're requesting it's a right in, right out with a left over. At this location, you wouldn't be allowed a left out. And we're working with DOT right now just to confirm that they're okay with that left over. They were fine with that left over being put in for the time period where the widening of Ottawa would not be yet completed, because that's still 4 or 5 years out before it's finished being built. But what we're working with them on and have some preliminary, okay from in concept is that leftover remaining even with the widening of Ottawa Road. And so that's what we're trying to get confirmation on at this time. And again, just going through the normal process of doing that study.
Because they're doing that along 74, they're making design changes as they build.
We're trying to get ahead of that hopefully so that it's just baked into what they're going to be working on. Yeah, so we don't have that. And then as we discussed, there is a right turn lane into, this is the main entrance, that's the county line basically. There's a right turn lane that's required to get put in here by NCDOT that we'll have to build. Other than the improvements to the entry road, there's no other improvements other than just working out the signal timing at this existing signal, but there's no other turn lane improvements required here based on the findings. And then the other improvement is actually way down here. That's why I needed the Google Maps, because it just wouldn't fit on that. There's a right turn lane requirement either here or here. It's just based on how the timing of that signal works. It was an option basically, and we're investigating on which one we're going to do to satisfy their requirements.
Do you know how long the banking will be for that right turn lane if it's on Ottawa? Down at Stevens Mill?
Oh, back where I was, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
I don't recall for sure. I think it was maybe 100-foot storage lane, or it wasn't terribly long, but it was.
It was enough to increase that capacity for that whole corridor.
Yeah, it was meaningful in the extent that it let there be more time for the traffic to go through that green light and have a separate lane for the rights. So that's why they were looking for that.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I would have a preference that improvement be put on Idlewild. That is the heavier traffic, and within the last 2 weeks, one of our teachers' husbands was involved in a 6-car accident coming from 485 at Stevens Mill. They come over that rise and people are slamming on their brakes, and there's no notice that you're gonna have that. So that would be my preference, to do it on Idlewild. I think that would be the most beneficial to our town, to our residents.
Okay.
So So I guess there's a couple things with that. The right turn lane in either case wouldn't necessarily help with that site issue that's there today.
Correct.
What the right turn lane is going to do is if it's at either one of the locations, it lets the green time going west to east on Idlewild be longer, and then therefore avoid that from being backed up. So whether we put it on, no matter which side we put it on, it's going to maintain what there, basically is out there today in terms of that green time. So the right turn lane here, and the reason that we're not sure about that, and I'll try to zoom in or put it on Street View here if I can. Yeah, yes, Street View did not seem to work just then, but I mean, should be a little, where'd my little guy go there? Well, you can kind of, oh, here we go. Oh, it'll work with me here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 utility poles would potentially be in the way of that improvement. That's why and that's why there's an option over here. There's really nothing, and that's kind of where we're thinking. And keep in mind that with any of the DOT plans that I've seen, at least for this, they're coming in here and they're widening this out with that bigger widening project. And so that's going to happen either way. It's just a matter of when, and that's why they're giving us the option, because almost whatever we do, we'll have to rip up part of it anyway.
And that's what confuses me. Why don't they do it all at one time? Instead of having you do it, pay for it, and then they're coming back and rip it out. I don't understand that. I know it's probably a bigger question that why is government so dysfunctional?
We asked that question too. We did, and we approached them about it, and from their standpoint, it was too long of a gap from when we would be building and impacting traffic to when they would be going in. They had no necessary guarantee of their timing. We did talk about that. It was an option discussed. It just didn't make sense from their standpoint.
So, and I'm sure Lynn and Alex have told you, we're in discussions with them to stop that super street design, because we don't favor the super street design.
Yeah.
So I don't think your residents would like the super street design as well. So the gentleman behind you is shaking his head, agreeing with me. So can y'all help us with DOT, convince them that we have a better design? You're spending a lot of money, and you want a return on your investment, and so I don't think that super street is a good return on your investment. So I'd ask y'all to help us convince DOT that this is the way it should be designed.
And I think Todd had kind of done that in the past and worked with some of the folks that you were working with. And I think Alex said it earlier, I think DOT has come around to not doing that super street at this point.
Well, they're coming around, but are we?
Yeah, so they're going to give us the full access intersection at the Harris Teeter light. What they are looking to do, and what we have not been able to convince them of as of yet, is they would like to put essentially what's a variation of a Michigan left turn at the intersection of Stevens Mill and Idlewild. I want to say it's June. They're around that time frame. They're going to be looking at putting out some concept plans for the public to comment on, and so they would give us the first look at those.
Did they give us 2 versions? That's what followed.
And that may be the case. I don't recall that specific. Yes, I think there are going to be several different options. So I will say that Todd has offered to help however he can with us to the DOT, and don't offer if you don't expect us to take you up on it, right? So we'll certainly be calling Todd to help us out at times appropriate.
I don't know if this question's for Lynn or for one of you guys. Has Matthews approved your plan, or where do you stay in the timeline for that?
We've deferred a decision on the rezoning 2 or 3 times. It's currently scheduled for a vote the same night, May 13th, that we're scheduled to come back here. So the way Matthews has looked at it,
they really want to know what Stallings thinks about it, because they view this as more of a Stallings project than a Matthews project.
Okay.
Now, because of the,
So if we're in agreement, they're pretty much going to use these.
yeah, well, it's interesting, that we had this public hearing for Matthews, we didn't have anyone, I don't believe we had any opposition.
No.
We've worked through all our issues with planning, we've got to give them some revised elevations for the townhomes. We're going to have some more meetings with some commissioners in the next 2 weeks, but it's scheduled for a vote. And so what we're hoping we can do is move our vote in Matthews to the end of their agenda. And I mean, if I can be so bold, maybe be towards the front of this agenda, then if it's approved here, we could call them and say it's approved. So,
Just head on down there.
but in any event, they did want it to get further, they didn't want to be too far in front of Stallings.
Okay.
They wanted us to go through the process with Lynn and Alex and the staff, to go through the subcommittee meetings, to go through the planning board, which we've done, to get through this meeting, and just to get make sure that everybody's on a concurrent path. Have I answered your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I talked to their council, it's quality, and they said whatever we want. All right, any other questions? Hey, what was your last name, sir?
Fever.
Fever? Any other questions from Mr. Fever? All right. Well, thank y'all for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right.
Appreciate your time.
Yes, sir. And that's, Whetstone.
Yeah.
Is off, so can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion made.
Thank you.
Motion by Mrs. Romanow, seconded by Mr. Billy Burke. Get him on the record. All right. All in favor? And that's unanimous. All right. This was with the lane. Let's just do it real fast.
That's exactly what.
I'm all for it.
You're not ready to, where you, you're doing that.
I need to get you a copy of this. I need a copy of this.
Straight up.
I'm grabbing it tomorrow, whenever the copies I'm good? All right.
You have to go down.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the same thing.
You know, I mean, now, if we said, let's have full access for us, and maybe your Stallings or Stevens Mill Road do a U-turn to get to the other part of Stevens Mill. They spec it better, but you should want to lane.
Alex, did you say Michigan left is likely? Or that's.
They would like to do some variation of the Michigan.
Michigan left is like a mini super street.
It is.
Let me say that they don't want to have full access at that intersection.
What about the roundabout? Is that dead?
Yes, so, well, I'm not gonna say it's dead. They don't want to
No,
do
I'm sure it would.
they don't want to do a roundabout there. And the reason they've said that is because the substation is right on there. And so in order to put that roundabout, you'd either have to move the substation